Welcome back, and I'm glad you could make it. In this chapter of Film Study Concepts, we'll be looking at shot duration and movement. Let's go! Shot duration simply refers to the temporal length of any given shot in a film. Though this is a fairly simple concept, the naming convention for shot duration can get a little confusing. Shots with relatively lengthy durations are referred to as long takes. There is no standard for the duration of a long take, so it might take a few films before you develop a feeling.
走吧，50里，离开这儿。只要他们抓不到你，租界虽然是日本人的势力，无凭无据，他们也不能把我们怎么样。
刚才我说的都是气话，大家都是弟兄，我还真的看着你去送死。
One trick to spotting a long take is seeing if a shot contains multiple actions or story elements. Does the shot contain an entire conversation rather than just a few lines? Does the shot include an entire fight scene rather than a single punch? If so, you might just be looking at a long take. Please be careful not to confuse this term with long shot. Although both terms are used to classify single shots, long shot refers to the distance while long take refers to the duration. On the other hand, the term short take is almost never used in film studies. This is because the duration of most shots in a film is only a few seconds. Short takes are the industry standard, and do not require nearly as much scrutiny as long takes. Now that we've talked about space and time within cinema, let's take a closer look at their combined effort, movement. Within a film, the perspective of the spectator is usually changed via the cutting and pasting of different shot angles in a process called editing. However, the spectator's perspective can also change when the camera itself moves during a shot. Let's start simple. The pan is where the camera pivots left or right while remaining physically stationary. This is a very common movement technique, as it unlocks the horizontal axis of the film world without the need to move the camera around. The tilt is very similar, and it entails a stationary camera pivoting up or down. This technique can be quite expressive, as highlighting the height of a subject can exaggerate the effect of high angle or low angle. Moving the camera itself during the shot requires a little bit of ingenuity. When the camera moves in any direction on the horizontal axis, it is called a tracking shot or dolly shot. This is due to the fact that oftentimes the camera is placed on a dolly or a track for precise and smooth movement. By physically moving through space, tracking shots are great at enhancing the sense of depth felt by the spectator. What if the camera wants to move physically through the vertical axis? That's where the crane shot comes in. The camera is mounted on a crane or cherry picker, which enables it to move up and down smoothly through space. Specialized equipment has been invented that allows the camera to move vertically and horizontally at the same time. So don't be startled when you see a shot that both tracks and cranes. But handheld shots are on the opposite end of the spectrum. As the name might suggest, handheld shot is recorded when the camera is being held by an operator as it moves through space. The resulting footage can appear shaky and disorienting. Handheld shots are often used to create a heightened sense of realism, as it suggests a lack of intervention between camera and subject. Steadicam shots are recorded using a Steadicam, a fairly new invention in the world of film. They allow for the recording of incredibly smooth-looking shots while the camera is strapped to the body of an operator. While Steadicam shots are fundamentally similar to handheld shots, both requiring an operator to physically move with the camera, the effect they create could not be more different. Let's take a second to briefly discuss lenses and the effects they can have on the camera's vision. A wide-angle lens allows for a wider horizontal view of the image when compared to other lenses. In return, objects in the distance appear smaller as the distance between objects in the foreground and background is exaggerated. Another feature of the wide-angle lens is its deep depth of field, meaning that objects in the foreground and background can be in focus at the same time. A telephoto lens, on the other hand, makes distant objects appear larger, like a telescope. As a result, the horizontal view of the image is more narrow, opposite of the wide-angle lens. The distance between foreground and background is diminished, and the entire image looks kind of smushed together. Another feature of the telephoto lens is its shallow depth of field, meaning that only a single plane can be in focus at any given time. Zoom is a little bit tricky to classify, as it's not technically camera movement. The illusion of movement is created through the use of zoom lenses, rather than physical movement. A zoom lens allows for the shot to go from wide angle to telephoto, and the perception to go from far to near. Sometimes it can be difficult to distinguish between a tracking shot and a zoom shot. One way to mitigate this is to look at any changes in depth of field we mentioned earlier. Another way in which film can change our perception without camera movement or editing is a technique called rack focus. During a rack focus shot, the focus shifts from one object to another. This technique can only be done with a lens with shallow depths of field, as only those lenses have a blurring effect on objects not in focus. Now that we have examined the how of camera movement, let's take a quick look at the why. This is what we call camera movement motivation, and it is divided into two different kinds. Motivated camera movement refers to changes in camera position initiated by actions or events within the film world. If the camera moves in an attempt to keep things in view, the movement can be considered motivated. Unmotivated camera movement is not quite the opposite of its counterpart. It simply refers to movements that is not dictated by events within the film world. Instead, these camera movements are most often used by the filmmaker as commentary or aestheticization. Whew, that was a mouthful, but here we are, another one down. I hope you learned lots from this quite challenging chapter. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact me or your instructor. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you in the next chapter.